Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to first present the two sets of commitment makers, and then we'll get into the panel. So I'd love to ask Joshua Aronson of the University of Chicago to come on up. And I want you all to know about Joshua. So the challenge that he's really trying to address is that while debate programming is abundant for well-to-do adolescent mainstream learners, students who are young, low-income, or have learning differences are often overlooked. Debating is typically taught as a competitive sport with teams winning and losing rounds. And because of the focus of debate is not on learning empathy or points of view of others, the quality of the discourse globally is often competitive, disparaging, and fruitless. So Debate It Forward is trying to address that by bringing debate programming to middle and elementary school students in Chicago that emphasize empathy, reason, and ownership. And in this program, students are encouraged to discuss issues through a collaborative game-based approach, not through competitive rounds. Core skills include argument generation, argument interaction, cross-examination, research, logic, ethics, perspective taking, public speaking, and extemporaneous speaking. And Debate It Forward actually hires University of Chicago students to teach these after-school and summertime debate classes that build students' confidence, critical thinking skills, and social-emotional skills. This logical reasoning, respectful disagreement, and public speaking skills are nurtured and emphasized in the program. And the children who are in low-income neighborhoods as early as first grade are being included in the programming. So Debate It Forward is also seeking to engage students with learning differences in these classes. Their success will be measured by before and after evaluations, including a control group and teacher feedback. So I'm excited to present this to you, for your commitment to action. Mm-hmm. Okay, our next commitment makers are from Floramind, and they are Mahmoud Kadir of the City College of New York, Kandakar Ahmed of, is it also from City College of New York? Okay, and Danny Choi, also City College of New York. So the challenge that they're addressing is that mental health in adolescence is a significant determinant of high school graduation, job retention, and criminal activity. Half of students with mental illness at age 14 to 18 drop out of high school, and 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system have a mental illness. We see that high school students are too often not adequately taught emotional management skills, nor the support strategies available for coping with mental health problems. So how's Floramind addressing this? They seek to address mental health and mental health literacy in high schools in New York. Programming is addressing mental health knowledge, self-care strategies, and social and emotional learning. The organization designs in-person workshops, after-school programs, and a digital platform that includes personalized video content and interactive exercises. Through various programs and activities, students learn to recognize the symptoms of mental illness, to find coping strategies for themselves and others, and to avail themselves of treatments and other resources when they're suffering. And the success of Floramind programs will be determined by self-report surveys that address the levels of stress, academic performance, and misbehavior. And surveys will also be conducted at schools where Floramind programming is not offered. So I'm happy to present you also with this certificate.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Congrats.
All right. Good. Now please welcome our panelists. Clifton Kinney, civil rights activist, founder of Our Destiny. Amanda Lippmann, co-founder and executive director, Run for Something. Samantha Paradis, mayor of Belfast, Maine, and registered nurse, Waldo County General Hospital.
Hello. Okay, so you're going to see how powerful these young leaders are. But before we launch into that, I want to ask everyone, actually, I'm going to bring you into this first question and ask you to think about the first moment where you as a young person felt powerful. Just take a second and try to find that moment. Hopefully you've located something. For some of us, it's going to take a little bit longer to remember or tap into that place. For some of us, it might be that we found that in school, or we found that in a community organization, or maybe we found it because some moment of injustice faced us and we had to do something about it. So this is also buying time a little bit for our panelists to locate that moment. But I hope we can start with that, to really think about how are we engaging young people, how are we utilizing education and bringing more young people's voices and action into trying to solve a lot of the problems that are facing us. So I'm gonna go ahead, and this time down the row, can you share with us the moment, Samantha, where you felt first powerful?
So I started working at a local family-owned nursing home when I was 14. I was a nursing assistant, and I cared for about 36 residents. I worked evening shift, 3 to 11 or 4 to 8. I initially, my title was CNA helper. I was the bed maker, but then I got promoted to nursing assistant and cared for people at the end of their lives. So, and mostly, a good majority of the people that I cared for were veterans of World War II. It was really tough work, you know, caring for people day in and day out, helping them get to bed, helping them eat their dinner, meeting their family, being in a very intimate part of their lives and their families' lives. But I guess this is a strange way to see power, but the privilege that I had to be a part of that space with the families and with these veterans who gave such a service to our country is something that I've always carried with me. I'm now a registered nurse. I'll be a nurse practitioner in June, hopefully, if I pass the boards. And I've provided hospice care, end-of-life care throughout my practice in healthcare, and you know, finding it a spiritual calling and being able to navigate that space that's often very, I mean, every time very emotional, you know, to go through a grieving process and a death. And so I guess I gain from that just this humanity and humility that is so important in my role as mayor and also in my everyday life. So I think I gain power from interactions with people that give my life meaning. So it's an unusual answer, but that's where I gather power.
It's incredible. Hey everyone, how's it doing? My name's Clifton Kinney. I started organizing at the age of 17 in Ferguson. I come from Ferguson, I come from St. Louis. About a month before Michael Brown had been murdered. I lost my own mother to stage 4 breast cancer. So I was in the midst of a state of anxiety, depression. I wasn't talking to anyone. I didn't want to get out the house. And I saw Mike's body on Instagram. And at the time, you know, we're young, we're in high school, we're using it to just, you know, share news, you know, gossip, this sort of thing. And I see his body, and I realize it's around the corner. So I get out there, and if you would have taken a picture of what you've seen that day, put it in black and white, you would have thought it was 1965. I mean, the police, they were already militarized. They were already having dogs on kids. My first time being tear gassed and hit with rubber bullets was on August the 12th, 2014. And you know, that night, as the smoke and the gas began to fill my insides, I began to cry and I began to wheeze and throw up. And I wasn't crying because it hurt, and it did hurt. But I was crying because I couldn't believe that something like that could happen to me today in today's America, especially to a young boy, to a community that they've forgotten They tend to forget Ferguson. I went to school the next day, and my teacher was saying that all these young people out here, a bunch of high schoolers like myself, you know, those thugs, those looters, they need to stop protesting. They just need to go vote. They don't even do that. You know, she kept critiquing and saying all these things, and I'm like, you know, how can you say such a thing, you know, when there's a war going on around the corner? So I left the classroom that day, right? I went home, texted a bunch of my friends. I said, we got to do something. I didn't know what was going to come out of, you know, 200 students coming to my house that night was an organization. We started Our Destiny STL, a massive coalition of high school students, over 1,000 across the St. Louis and Ferguson area. And we did the first massive walkouts and, you know, the protests and demonstrations and the voter registration drives. We were just labeled thugs and looters. We didn't get the media attention at the time. I was able to meet with President Barack Obama and all these incredible things, but I think within that moment, realizing that this could happen to my people, that this could happen to me, I said enough was enough, and that's why I'm here. And I'm not going to share too much right now. I want to get to the rest of everybody, but I want to hear from you all, because we're here today for so much more than just, you know, you all coming and me pouring out to you. I want to pour in. You know, let's work together and build a collective vision so that we could transform our world. So yeah, thank you.
My story is much more boring. My name is Amanda Lippmann. I was born and raised in Virginia. I always loved politics, always. I used to watch West Wing growing up, which it's on Netflix now, so stream it. It's pretty soothing. And it taught me that politics was a way to change the world. Idealistic, sure, but a way to change the world. I went to Northwestern up in Evanston specifically to work for Barack Obama when I was a senior in college. I got an internship on his campaign, the presidential headquarters, doing online fundraising. So if you've ever got an email from Barack Obama that says, "Hey," in the subject line, that was me and my team. I worked for him through the election. We won. That was fun. Winning is good. Then worked for Organizing for Action for a year, moved down to Florida, worked for the governor's race there, lost that one. Losing is bad, but do it in Florida. You get to go to Disney World, which is pretty nice. Then I moved to New York to work for Hillary Clinton. I was her email director, which is a title that is a little confusing given how often Hillary Clinton emails is in the news. But it was an incredible honor and a privilege and a delight and the hardest and best thing I've ever done. Election night was horrible. It was the most powerless I've ever felt. It was seeing this country that I didn't recognize, and I remember standing at the Javits Center, which is the place in New York we were supposed to celebrate. It's an entirely glass convention center. We were under the ceiling that we were supposed to metaphorically break that evening, and thinking all of the little boys in this country are going to grow up seeing that this is the way they can treat women and get rewarded, and all of the little girls are going to grow up seeing that they're never going to be able to climb to the top of the power struggle in this country. In the weeks after the election, I started hearing from friends from high school and college. "Hey, Amanda, you're the only person I know that works in politics. Seems like anybody can be president these days. I want to run for city council here in Chicago. I'm a teacher. I want to do this. What do I do?" And I didn't have a good answer for them. At the time, there wasn't something that existed that if you were young and newly excited about politics and you wanted to do more than just vote or volunteer, you wanted to lead, that would help you. And that felt like a problem I could solve. So that is the moment I felt power. I realized this is something I could do. I have an idea. We could create a group that helps people who want to run for office. I'm unemployed, so I've got the time. And I'm angry. I'm so angry. And my rage could fuel this, because there is almost nothing you can't will into being if you're willing to work hard enough and put aside everything else for a little while. I found an incredible co-founder who'd been working in politics for a decade. We talked and talked and talked and wrote a plan and built a website. And then on Inauguration Day, almost 2 years ago, we launched Run for Something, thinking it'd be really small. It's going to be our side hustle. We'd get maybe 100 people who want to run in the first year. Since we've launched, 19,000 people have raised their hands to say they want to run, which is so exciting. And I'm sure that I'll get a little bit more into what we do and who they are and their stories, but I want to tell you very briefly, they are people like you all. They are young, they're all under 40. None of them have political experience. None of them have ever run for office before. 50% are women, almost 40% are people of color, and they are changing the world. And getting to be a part of that process with them is how I feel power every day.
See, they're powerful people up here. So I want to step back and talk about why that's the first question to lead towards the others, because I think, you know, we're all trying to figure out ways that we're inviting more young people to the table, that we're offering this, and those pathways are not going to be the same for everyone. How every person in this room came to be here, or came to be involved, or came to be engaged is going to look really different. And so that means, in my role in the public school system, it meant thinking about how schools were places where we opened those doors, we started those relationships, we brought in issues. It breaks my heart that a teacher would tell you that you were a thug and that what you were doing, that's the kind of, you know, work we have to do in our schools. And schools aren't the only place, right? We really have to think about all of the ways all of us are opening doors and bringing more young people into this conversation. And I want to use that to segue into not so long ago, civil rights, you know, icon John Lewis said it's time to maybe get in some good trouble, right? We heard that. And there's some really interesting conversations happening about what does that good trouble look like? What's the right way for us to get involved? What are the right way for people to step in and engage? So I'm really interested in hearing from you all. You each found different paths, it's clear. You each ended up where you were because of a series of experiences that you had. As you think about how we can open more doors to young people, maybe you could speak a little bit to what is important for people as they find their lane, as they find their path. What are the things that really matter that we should be thinking about, instead of saying one thing is better than the other? As people make the choices that feel right for themselves and their communities, what do you hope that they're really keeping in mind?
Yeah, so you know what? In Ferguson, we were called troublemakers, right? But I don't think we were troublemakers of the worst kind. I think we were troublemakers of the best kind. I think, you know, we have to make sure that we're building a mass mobilized movement that's going to adhere to people's concerns and their needs. In Ferguson, when we first started organizing, again, 200 of us met in my backyard. None of us had organizing experience. Some of us may have been leaders on our respective high school campuses. I was president of my class. None of us had organizing experience, but we all studied history. I remember I didn't have receive my first Black history lesson until my freshman year of high school, and it was taught by my mentor, Latino, Mr. Vargas. And Mr. Vargas was actually the one that I called during that whole time. You know, I'm asking him, you know, you taught us so many things about SNCC and all of the Black women that have, you know, led movements back then, and we're at the same point. And he said, Cliff, you know what? I taught you these things. So we realized we had to build a organization, a coalition. And there were many different, you know, strategies and tactics we could have used, because we understood that organizing was nothing more than bringing together a bunch of young people that share a collective vision, and then we had to organize around specific goals, right? And we had to implement our goals and around specific strategies, and it's taken time. You know, we didn't get the attention at first, so we didn't believe that we were doing everything right. And we had older activists coming down at us. So it's like we were getting pushed from the police. We were getting pushed back from young people who didn't really understand why we're trying to fight. And I'm still young myself, so I'm still Generation Z. I'm still navigating. I was sitting and talking with Emma Gonzalez and in the Twitter headquarters. We were just sitting and talking. And we're realizing that we're a bunch of young people that are brought together through trauma, and now we're being called upon to transform and save the world. Like, really? So like, knowing that, I want to get into this idea that we gotta revitalize our civics education. I don't even remember having a civics course throughout elementary school, y'all. Or even like in high school, or we're not even talking about it in college. So, got a lot of work to do.
I'm gonna +1 that one. We need more civic education in our schools for sure. Anyone else want to follow up from there?
Yes. So when somebody tells me that we do something because we've always done it that way, that's like the biggest red flag for me, it's like, no, that's not the correct answer to any question. There's got to be some reasoning for why it became ingrained in whatever cultural practices are happening in whatever group dynamic is existing. Pushing back to say, well, just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it always has to be done that way. And in nursing, we see that a lot through our practice and moving more towards an evidence-based practice. So thinking about, well, what is the evidence telling us and how can we move from there? Like one really simple example that I have is after I was elected, our meetings, the city council meetings, are sometimes 5 hours long. I've tried to not have it. There's a whole nother thing, but I started taking breaks every hour, and it was like the sky was falling. Like, to take a break every hour was this monumental thing among the counselors. The previous culture was that the mayor would just get up in the middle of the meeting and let the meeting continue to run when they wanted to take a break. I was like, that is not happening for me. No, I've been elected to lead one real, big responsibility I have is to lead the meetings, and that's what I plan on doing. Thank you very much.
Hold on one second, just before you move, because I want to push you a little further. Like, what is it that makes you show up in a space and say, no, it's not enough to just say that it always is and always has been and always will be? Like, what brings you there? What makes that, as a young person walking into probably a really intimidating space where this history of how we always have is probably pretty strong?
I guess, what brings me there, like, I grew up Catholic in a very small community in northern Maine, and I grew up in a community where I didn't see anybody out and queer, and I didn't come out until I had moved outside of the state. I'd moved to Minnesota. I grew up in this culture where it wasn't acceptable to be out and queer, or to even be queer. And so I guess that's where my motivation comes, is that it's okay to be me, and it's okay to be you. And the way we walk through life is much different or much the same, and that's all okay. But we need to think about what are the kind of social contexts around what we do, and then what is the evidence for that. So. And in taking a break, people can't think. If you're sitting for more than 120 minutes, you're not going to make good decisions. So we're going to take a break.
I love that. So a little background. In the past, when party structures were trying to find candidates to run for office, they would go through networks they already knew. They would look for candidates who met the conventional wisdom of what an electable or winning candidate looks like. Spoiler alert, that's usually rich old white men, often lawyers. Nobody is ever going to ask you permission to run. No one's ever going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, it's your turn to lead. Let me help you. Run for Something does that now. But in the past, that wasn't a thing that party structures and party institutions and official establishments did, especially to young people, especially for young women, especially young people of color. We were risky bets. If we couldn't raise money, no reason to take a chance. Voters definitely wouldn't elect us. There was just, that would be silly. There's no way. Since Run for Something has launched, we have been pushing back on this party structure, on this system, making what I like to call some frenemies in the process. But I think it's important because the reality is in a democratic country, our government should represent the people. Only 5% of state legislators are currently under the age of 35. In Congress, if you are looking for millennial representation or Gen Z representation, there should be about 100 of us. There are 5. You remember that hearing when Congress was like talking to them about Facebook and Twitter, and one of the members of Congress was like, how do you send an email over WhatsApp? It's like, dude, you've never used the technology. You don't understand how this works. You don't understand how most people are interacting with these tools and why it matters to have government legislating it in a way that makes sense. Representation matters, not just as part of, for diversity's sake or for tokenization, but because lived experience influences your political priorities. It matters to have young people, young women, young people of color into these positions, and if we didn't push the boundaries and demand presence in these rooms, we wouldn't be there in the first place. So yeah, they can get mad at me, I can get called ageist, I don't care. It matters. And it's why I'm so excited about all, especially the young women and young people of color who are running this year, because it means moving forward, it's not gonna be as scary. And it's not gonna be as troublemaking. I aspire for a day when it's so utterly boring to have a record number of women running for office. That's my dream. I want it to be no headlines.
So I wanna kind of move from something that you said. So after the path that I'm on, and I think the path that you're on, and the path that you're on, and the path of that maybe that we're all on, is uncharted, right? There's not a, this is the next step, and that's the next step. There's nobody saying, this is the way to do it. It's a lot of how you navigate it and getting to make your own decisions about what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. And my barometer of that is when I'm faced with a tough decision, am I gonna be able to sleep at night? If I make this decision and I know it's the right decision, but this may happen, but I have to deal with that consequence, will it be okay for me, my moral compass, to make that decision? So it helps me to kind of navigate, yeah.
I got to think of an example there. Yeah. I remember after the non-indictment of Darren Wilson, the military, I'm sorry, and I gotta go back. Every time I go back, I get post-traumatic. The military was there, the National Guard was there, and the police were there. All three are, they're militarized. My high school was around the corner from Ground Zero. So there were a lot of nights where I would be out in Ferguson all day and all night, and then I would go to my grandmother's house, take a quick shower. Sometimes I couldn't. And I would go straight to school. After the non-indictment, we decided to walk out. So we either decide to walk around the corner and face the military, and I risk 200 students getting hit with tear gas and rubber bullets, and that's on my shoulders. Or we can decide to hold off, let's get a meeting going, let's see if we got administrative support to do something more long-term. I grapple with that. For many days, and ultimately we decided to walk out, but to go in the other direction. And then I met with my principal, and we decided to raise over $2,000 for the Ferguson Burger Bar. We brought his restaurant to my school. I said, you keep talking about how you want to support the black youth in Ferguson. Let's actually put your money where, let's put it where it's worth. Let's bring the restaurant here and help the youth. So those sorts of decisions, short-term, long-term strategy, do I put people at risk? I was 17 thinking about those things. I can only imagine what the decisions you have to make when you got folks running for office, or the decisions you have to make when you're looking at the budget and how do you allocate funds for the poorest areas and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. And yeah, I think as we grow into leadership roles, we are faced with these type of decisions that it's you're the one that's looked to. Is this right? Where do we go from here? And you get to use what your experience has been, and then to branch out to the connections that you've made. Maybe even connections you're making here today, and say, I've got this problem. Can you help me figure it out? Those phone calls at midnight, or shout out to my mom. She's in the audience today. She's first time. second time on a commercial flight out here to Chicago. We're from a very small town of 800 people on the border of Canada and northern Maine, so she made it all the way here. I'm really happy to have her here today.
Welcome. So I want to pick up on something that actually all of you have mentioned, which is this, you know, you're charting a path forward against what you articulate as a current going the other way sometimes, right? But I'm wondering if you found moments for intergenerational working and collaboration, you know, where we have the opportunity to imagine folks working together where others might also be invested in young people. If you could speak to any moments where you've found that to either work or not work, and what are the challenges with trying to work across some of these?
So Run for Something only works with people under the age of 40. Those are our candidates. We wanted to create a space for young people who felt like they were eager to lead. It gave us a way to communicate in a very specific way. It also meant that if you were younger and maybe couldn't raise money or didn't have as long a resume, you weren't going to be elbowed out. One, I get called ageist once a week. That's fine. Second, our volunteers are primarily much older. And you've seen a lot of news stories about this, you know, the indivisible groups, the people showing up to call their members of Congress. They tend to be older white women. Much of the work has been doing organizing the communities primarily driven by women of color, and they deserve much more credit than they're getting in the press over the last 2 years. But the new wave of activists tends to be older white women. And that has been true primarily through our volunteers too. So it's been very interesting to see this conversation happen between our volunteer manager, who is a 47-year-old lady who lives in Napa, who is incredible, every day answering the emails from the young candidates who sign up and say, I'm not sure I can do this. And hearing her respond to them, listen, I'm not telling you you have to, because running for office is really hard and nobody should convince you to do it. You got to be driven by something more. But if you do, I'll help you. If you do, I'll make sure you have the resources you need. If you do, we're going to get you the funding, we're going to get you the volunteers, we're going to get you the skills. You're not going to be alone. You're not going to be alone with me, and you're not going to be alone with a bunch of peers like you who are running too. And I think having that messenger makes it a really powerful, because running for office is hard, but it's hard because it's hard. It's not hard because you're bad at it. I mean, some people are bad at it, but generally speaking, it's not hard because you're bad at it. It's just a hard thing to do. So knowing you're not alone and knowing you're part of something bigger and knowing that there are people like you and much older who have your back makes all the difference. And I say that as someone who started a group from nothing, being able to meet executive directors around the country who have been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. I'm often the youngest person in these rooms. Knowing they have my back helps me too, so.
Go ahead with that, that's great. So I came to Belfast. I'm the mayor of Belfast, Maine, and I came to Belfast as a travel nurse, and I eventually fell in love with the city, and I went away and went to West Africa, did my master's practicum, came back, took a permanent position as a public health nurse. And one of the biggest things that I heard people talking about as I went into these rooms and met community leaders was that older people were having a hard time staying in their homes. And I saw that in my work at the hospital. And I heard this from like many different spheres, like different circles, right? And I thought, well, how do we make something happen, like take action? So I brought everyone to the same table and said, okay, let's do something now. And we created an aging initiative called Aging Well in Waldo County. And this was part of, right before I ran for mayor, was great, getting all these people to the table, creating this aging initiative through AARP, and being that kind of leader to make that happen. And it turned out really well for my campaign. It also made a big difference, in the community. I had no idea when I started that work that I would eventually run for mayor. And then when I did run for mayor, I ran on a climate platform, and helping the city transition to 100% municipal electricity use, which will reach 90% by the end of this year, so that's awesome. We'll install a huge solar array this year. I think it's like 2,200 panels, and we'll generate revenue in year 3. But when I was elected, again, people from different circles came to me and said, we want this to happen in our city. We want this to happen related to climate. And I jumped on the first thing and was like, okay, let's do that. And then like, you know, a few days later, I got this other email. I was like, I can't do any of it. We all gotta get around the same table. And as it turns out, we created a city climate change committee, and the people that that came to me with the information are appointed on the committee, and now we're studying the effects of sea level rise, and most of them are retired folks. Retired meteorologist, retired scientist, retired editor, a retired lawyer. We have a young artist, and she's amazing. And she, if you've gotten my business card, she drew the rowing gig on it. But so being able to connect intergenerationally is absolutely essential. And a lot of these people have turned out to be my mentors, who, like you said, you called your teacher. That's where it's at.
I want to hear Cliff's answer to this, but I just want to point out something Sam is describing extremely well. The power that local government has to make a difference on issues that seem so abstract. Climate change, a town of 800 people, can actually make a difference.
So I grew up in a town of 800, but I lead a city of 6,600.
6,600.
Still very small.
Still small. And like, what an incredible opportunity to make a difference on an issue that feels so beyond our realm, beyond our ability to make a difference. It is so possible when you get local. And it's one of my favorite things about working with candidates running for local office, like mayors and city councils and school boards and coroners and library boards, which I'm obsessed with, and American River Flood Control District trustees. Because you think you can't make a difference on climate change or trade or immigration or women's health if you're not in Congress or in the White House. But that is so not true. And it is amazing. I love that. I'm so into this.
So not only does our organizing have to be intergenerational, but it also has to be intersectional. We have to understand how race, class, sex, and gender, how it all intertwines in our organizing. I remember how a few months ago Parkland happened, and you know, I was angry one day, and I shot out a tweet saying, you know, how we were critiqued at the time, called thugs and looters, and it was really a cry for our movements to come together. And because we understand that black youth have been protesting for gun reform now for many years, because police violence is also gun violence. And our movements did come together. That was the intersectional piece. That was important. Intergenerational. I remember Ferguson happened. A bunch of folks came down. Al Sharpton. We didn't really receive him well. Some older activists, SNCC activists. I met with several SNCC activists. I attend Howard University right now. I'm in my senior year. I'll be graduating in May. Yeah, guys, it's been a journey. You know, my mom, I just lost my father last month. He passed away. So I had to bury him. I've been dealing with that. You know, it's just come full circle. You know, I was speaking with Dory Ladner, who was a SNCC activist. And, you know, I was sitting and asking her, I was like, you know, what do we need? The question you always ask your elders, what do we do? What's the answer? What's the end to this? Because protest isn't the solution. Like, protest isn't, I didn't want to be an activist or organizer or a protester. I'm letting y'all know that right now. I did it because I had to. It was necessary for me to fight for my survival. If I wasn't out there protesting or mourning, because we weren't even trying to protest, we were mourning. Right? My community was mourning. A dead black boy was left in the streets for over 4 hours, and we were mourning. And then we were met with violence. We were met with the tear gas and the rubber bullets and that sort of thing. And then we had to take the step. You know, we stepped up. I was speaking with Dory Ladner, and I was saying, you know, when does this end? She says, you know, I don't know. And that was the most honest piece of advice an older activist could have gave me. Because I knew within that moment that all the tactics and strategies and all the workshops and sessions that all these traditional organizations could come down with and bring to us, it really didn't matter, because What mattered was how we were going to respond to our situation at hand. Because we understood that as oppression manifests and as it changes and shifts its tactics, we had to do the same as well. So yes, we vote today, and tomorrow we march. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it won't matter if we don't have a collective vision on what our society looks like. And our society must look like this. Everyone's needs. We live in a society in which we value profit now. Everyone's basic needs should be met. We have to transform our society, a mass mobilized movement. And it could have started with further generations. The millennials are on it, but Generation Z, we're stepping up. We're saying enough is enough, y'all. Y'all better watch out.
Raise your hand if you're excited to volunteer or donate to Cliff's campaign for mayor of Ferguson. I'm coughing up money, dude.
And we'll end with this last round before we turn back for the audience to engage with each other. But a big part of this, like how do we build the collective vision that you said, Cliff, is about bringing the voices to the table that often are not brought to the table, right? It's thinking about communities, even at a local level, that continuously get left out of decision making, that aren't engaged. Young people being a really big group, young people of color, low-income youth, queer youth, young people with disabilities, folks in rural areas, like the consistent groups that aren't at the table for policy making, that aren't often invited. What are the ways that we open that table? What are the ways that we're setting the table, bringing chairs to it, and making sure that the rooms that we're in are bringing those, are listening and are engaging? What are the ways that you all have seen that? And in that, I'd love if you could tell us, you know, a big problem is we don't hear those narratives. We have kind of these tropes about young people, about who participates and how and why, and we don't get to hear the stories of young people who are every day changing. So if you can also share an example of ways that young people have made that space available at the table, even if it wasn't offered to them.
Okay, I could do this for like 5 hours. So I'll give you two candidates that I'm excited about, one from 2017 and one running right now. 2017, we worked with a young woman named Jennifer Carol Foy in Virginia, Northern Virginia. Jennifer Carol Foy is an African-American woman. She was a magisterial judge. She was one of the first Black women to graduate from the Virginia Military Institute. She won her primary by 14 votes a week after having given birth to preemie twins. She's a badass. There's a story about Jennifer in The Nation magazine that talks about how she was campaigning in the part of Virginia where she lives, which is like on the edge of where it could be Northern Virginia, D.C., could be Southern Virginia. And these two guys were on the other side of the parking lot wearing Confederate flag T-shirts. She didn't have to go up to talk to them. She was not going to win their vote. But she felt it was important that they heard from someone who was trying to represent them in the Virginia House of Delegates. So she walks over. Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm the Democrat running for House of Delegates in Virginia. I'd love to talk to you about what's on your mind. Had a conversation with them. The bravery and courageousness and the kind of, I know that I'm not going to convince them, but it's worth my time to talk to them because that's what democracy is all about. Sort of gumption, chutzpah, if you will, that she showed in that is incredible. She won her election in November, flipping a seat red to blue. She is now leading the charge to pass the ERA in Virginia. She helped pass Medicaid expansion to more than 400,000 kids, making sure that every kid in Virginia had access to the kind of health care that saved her babies' lives. She's going to run for governor, and when she's president one day, I'm going to be so smug about it. She's incredible. Second candidate, here in outside Chicago. Her name is Hadiya Afzal. She's 19. She's a sophomore at DePaul. She's running for DuPage County Board, which is, DuPage County right outside Chicago, very Republican area. She's a Democrat. She's running for one of, I believe it's 3 seats in the area. She's a Muslim woman. She wears a hijab. She's knocked 5,000 or 6,000 doors so far. She says she goes up to homes of Republicans and independents and has been chased away by dogs more than once and says it very sort of like, not a big deal. She goes up to them and says, hi, I'm Hadiya. I'm running for county board. I want to talk to you about your taxes. Even if they have no interest in talking to this young brown woman, they want to talk about their taxes because this is a girl that if she wins is going to have control over them. It is incredible to see her bravery. Her campaign team is all her peers. It's like the college Democrats of DePaul and the surrounding schools. If you want to go knock doors for her, you should. It's very fun. If she wins this fall, she's going to make such a difference. I could literally do this for hours, and you should go to runforsomething.net to see all of our candidates. But I want you to take away from this is that politicians and the people that lead our government are more than just the people you see on TV. They're people like you, like me, like us, leading and making a difference. And even if Hadiyah loses this fall, she will have made her community stronger for it. And that is something that I reinforce every day. Win or lose, simply stepping up and getting in the process makes a difference.
I could name so many people, but I'm going to list them. So a few organizations. The young activists at Howard University who took the A building last spring. I'm going to name Students Demand Action STL, who are the young high school students back home right now. They're restarting that coalition that I formed just 3 years ago that reached out to me. I wish I didn't blank, but all the incredible young people right now, globally, that are rising up. Shout out to us. Shout out to y'all. You know, we're here. You know, you're not just here listening to me, like I was said. Like I hope you all, and I challenge you all. Like I'm going to challenge you all. Take something today, go back into your community, and do something about it. No, for real. Like the way you get started is you get around with like-minded folk, and you say, okay, what can I do? I may not run for office. I could make a phone call. I could get on the internet. You know, I could do something. Decide to do it and do it. But that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, great. And I think you guys are doing. I've been attending some of the sessions this morning and then last night, and I'm so inspired by all of your commitments. Wow. So there's this concept called health in all policies, where every policy affects the health of the community, and that's really what got me into politics as a registered nurse. That I could not ignore that good portion of the people that I served didn't have access to health insurance, didn't have access to economic justice or environmental justice, you know, thinking about these larger looming issues that could be solved through policy. But thinking about voice a couple of communities that I try to lift up, and I think I do in my work. After I was elected, I was invited to speak at the Head Start, which the Head Start playground is like in my window to my bedroom is here, and then there's the Head Start playground. And if you work night shift, I have to like listening to kids a lot. But I read a book to the Head Start when I was first elected, and I was just there last week meeting with the parenting policy group, and how their voices are being uplifted within the policy group, it's like a school board for Head Start, and just seeing just how empowering that is for the members of this policy group. And I said to them, what would it take for you to come to a public meeting held by the city? You know, they're almost always in the evening. They usually run late. And there's no space for their children. So I've been thinking a lot about providing childcare at our public meetings, and brought that up at our last city council meeting to say to our councilors, here's a heads up, during the next budgeting process, I'm gonna ask for funding for childcare during public meetings.
So we're going to welcome you back, and we'd love to open the opportunity for questions from the audience for our awesome panelists. So there are some microphones in the back if anyone has a question that they want to. So we have someone up here. I'll try to scan. So I see someone here, someone there, and right over there.
Am I the first one? Hello, my name is Dorsey, and thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. My question is, so politics, it's a calling. Everybody has their different calling, and so some people get involved and others not. But for those who aren't involved, they typically think protesting and calling their representative is the way to go. And recently we've seen that very publicly, thousands of people have spoken out and they've called their representative and nothing has happened. they were not heard. As people who are trying to impact our communities, how do we go on to convince those people your voice is still important, it matters, and you should still speak out when it's so broadly projected that it isn't, it's ineffective. How do we go on about that?
So are you getting to the Supreme Court nomination?
Yeah, and the shooting as well. You know, a lot of people spoke up, and we didn't see any immediate action from politicians.
So I'm from Maine, right? And so is Senator Collins. And I wrote an op-ed, and I got involved in a press conference saying, you know, hey, we really need to protect women's across the spectrum reproductive rights, reproductive justice. But after it became apparent, you know, Dr. Ford testified Wednesday, you know, the vote happened, I think, on Friday and Saturday. Wednesday, I organized a group of 16 elected women from Maine, senators, representatives, mayors, local electeds, to travel to DC and to meet with Senator Collins. She did not give us time to meet with her. She had us meet with her staff. And that was a really tough, you know, many of us were there wanting to share our experiences of sexual assault. I had been sexually assaulted in high school, close to where Senator Collins and I are from, the same part of Maine. And it was a whole kind of just very, it was a lot to take in, situation. There was press and Senate staff, and we met with Senator King, who is our other senator, and was very, very kind and met with us personally. But while we were there, I was interviewed by Portland Press, and then following that, you know, the next day, hearing Senator Collins' speech at a family planning office in Maine where I'm doing clinical. It was a lot to take in. And you're right, like, how do we, you know, what's the best way to sustain this? And we were talking about that here to make change. And, you know, following that, I was again contacted by the reporter and asked, you know, would you be willing to share this story through our, you know, share this with us. And then I didn't realize that it would be, you know, front page on a Sunday edition, and like what the emotions were along with that. To share so transparently what I had experienced, and then the travel and all of it, and then to not know what was going to come out with the news article, like that anxiety of like what's going to happen, you know, what is going to be printed on Sunday. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is like the work doesn't end. It's every day, but it's in a way that you get to decide is okay for you. Like, I made the decision to share with the news reporter because I felt as though I was okay to do that, and that I had the support necessary to move through those emotions. But you need to know what's okay for you. And to get up every day. I loved what Chelsea Clinton said at the opening, you know, optimism is a moral choice. And I truly believe that, and I can't get up. I told that to the news reporter. She was like, well, how do you do this? I was like, well, I can't get out of bed without having hope. So it's every day, and it's getting engaged with something that you have passion for, because maybe passion isn't the right word, but you just have this calling to make something, you know, make a difference, but make it so that everybody can feel have their basic needs met, as you were saying.
So yeah. How do you? So I think your question is about how do we sustain? How do we keep going? Right?
How do we continue to convince people, to empower people to speak out and still have a voice when it's, in many, many cases, not just the Kavanaugh case, but like in other cases as well, that their voices have not been heard, you know, and they're not the ones making the decisions.
Right. Well, I think it's our desire for a liberated society, our desire for a world in which we're all free, and we're still not free. And I'm not just speaking about the United States. Like when I speak about movements and struggles, I'm thinking about this international ordeal, right? This, you know, we're all not free. So that struggle in our collective vision, I feel like it's what's going to keep us sustained and what's going to continue to bring, just like I witnessed it with Parkland. Like it's going to continue bringing new and younger generations and older generations into the struggle. That's not my issue. My issue is, okay, when we bring folks into the struggle, what's our vision? How do we build it? That sort of thing. Do we have conferences? Do we continue to march? You know, do we continue to have rallies? Because our I don't like using the word enemy. The opposition is well organized. So we have to be well organized as well. Not to say that, like I just went through a death. Like, but I still got to think about a conference call with Nancy Pelosi and like how we're going to, like, what are young people like thinking about? You know, like the potential speaker of the House is asking me, hey, what are young Black Generation Z, what are young people thinking about? So I have to continuously think about those things, and while dealing with my own personal things. But what's keeping that fire in me? I'm one of 8 kids. My mom had 8 kids. My mom and father had 8 kids, and she always taught us that we were like a chain, right? And if one link was off the chain, then the whole link was off. And I always view us like that. I view our society like that. And if one person just plays their part, putting that little link back on, you put your link on, you put yours on, the chain will get strong again. So yeah.
I think how we sustain ourselves is community. We come together. You know, there's an old saying in campaigns, you come for the candidate, you stay for the people you meet when you're knocking doors or making calls. It is very hard and very tiring, and losing is so bad, and it feels bad, and the morale is hard. But we're organizing for a future we might never see. I might not be alive when we elect the first woman president. That's a devastating thought. I hope that's not true. I will work my damnedest to make sure that's not true, but that might be true. You can be damn sure when they write the history of it, I'll be a part of it though, even if I'm not around. And I think about that every day, is we have to measure our successes and our victories not by what happens today or tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, but next decade, next generation. What are my kids gonna see? What are my grandkids gonna see? It sucks. But knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you can rely on others to pick up the slack when you need to take a break and step back, because it is so important to take a break and step back and not feel bad about it. And know that however you get involved, however you get engaged, whatever it is, whether it's politics or protesting or marching or calling your representative or simply writing postcards or posting on Facebook, doing something is better than doing nothing. Because for most people, it's not the choice between the most effective politically science research tactic or the other, it's something or nothing. And simply by doing something, that's enough. And doing something with others is even better. So you should feel good about doing whatever it is you do.
Thank you. Thank you all.
No problem.
I'm going to be the one that has to say that the time clock is like yelling at me right now because everybody has to get over to the next session.
Sorry.
I'm really sorry for those, and hopefully maybe you can make your way to the folks in the front if you want to ask a question. Yeah.
Wrap up with like a few last words.
If you have any questions for me, my DMs are open. I'm not Hollywood at all. Like you can email me. I'll talk to you. Let's build a different world. Let's do this.
And the same for me. I'm on Twitter, and then my email is samantha@samanthaparody.org.
Runforsomething.net. You all should run for office.
Woohoo! Can you join me in thanking our panelists today, and thank all of you.